I'm John Luciew, and we are live on YouTube for the usual 4 p.m. Tuesday show. And boy, this off season seems to be coming at us fast. The combine is in the rearview mirror, and the free agents frenzy is dead ahead. The legal tampering period begins Monday, and that always seems like a weird thing to say, legal tampering. But one of the guys who apparently wants to get tampered with is the Steelers' Kenny Gainwell at running back, who had a great season, receiving passes and running the ball. Really was the favorite son of Aaron Rodgers. So, and the Steelers won him back. The Steelers won him back. So, Nick, who is going to be in the market for Kenny's services, and how badly do the Steelers want him back?
They badly want him back. From what I heard, the combine, the Steelers are willing to really jockey up significant resources to keep Kenneth Gainwell in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, as you did mention, you alluded to, I think from Kenny G's side, he wants to see what his market's like. And I think that's fine. I think that's the correct way to go about it. He's really maybe for running backs, sometimes you only get one payday. He didn't get a big payday last year. He kind of came on and had to prove himself in a bigger role. Well, he did that and more. And this is a really good free agency period for running backs. That's going to be the one thing is there's a lot of really good running backs. Now, Javonte Williams and Breece Hall are off the market, right? So those two guys are gone. So you're kind of left with still some significant pieces. You got, ETN out there. You have J.K. Dobbins. You have more than enough pieces. Aaron Jones is going to be released and be on the market. There's going to be a lot of players. So it's not just going to be Kenny Gainwell out there. So there's going to be a significant amount of people watching this market, and Kenny Gainwell is going to be one of them, and he's going to be the second tier. He's going to be in the second tier of these guys. So the question is there going to be a team that maybe doesn't want one of those top options that's going to say, we want Kenny Gainwell. He's a little bit of a different player with how he can do everything, and certainly with how much of a receiving back he is. But I was told, the Pittsburgh Steelers want to keep this guy, and they might even be willing to overpay for him a little bit. I think the one deterrent people have brought up is you're paying two running backs, right? Well, remember what Omar Khan said in his press conference last week? He said, we might do some things that are a little unusual in the usual NFL building metasphere because we have so much cap space. They have so much cap space to work with. They don't have a quarterback long term. That changes how you can roster construct because you're spending everything but at quarterback. So that is going to be something to look at. But I think Kenny Gainwell is at the forefront of the Steelers' minds. Let's see if they can keep him. It's really going to be all about how expensive he gets. And if he does get super expensive, where do they pivot? I heard Rico Dowdle's name brought up a few times. He played under Mike McCarthy in Dallas. Completely different player than Kenny Gainwell, more of a pure runner. So that's someone to keep an eye on. I think Aaron Jones would be someone to keep an eye on. He played with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. Mike McCarthy knows him very well as well. So there's connections there. So if they do not get Kenny Gainwell back, my expectation is they will sign another running back. So I am expecting dollars to be put to the running back position, whether it is for the Steelers' team MVP last year, Kenny Gainwell, or for someone else. But I expect Kenny Gainwell to be the first one that they look at in the forefront of their minds.
Excellent. That is good news, and a really good, astute comment in the chat. And we're getting some good chats going early and often, which is what we want. But this all these off-season moves are like dominoes. One falls, another falls into place, and obviously, the Steelers were looking high and low at the draft for wide receiver talent, and there is talent at the top and into the middle of that draft, especially in that first round. But depending on what they do in free agency, which they could do something with Dobbs, as we always mention his name when free agency and wide receiver and the Steelers are in the same sentence. So depending on what they do in free agency at the position of wide receiver, we know there will be a reboot in that wide receiver room. Does that change their shopping list at pick 21 or above should they move up?
This is a position I think they're going to flood. 14 formal interviews of the 45 they had were on the wide receiver position. That says a lot. And it says that they're looking at a lot of different guys. Now, we talk about Romeo Dobbs. We talk about Jawan Jennings Alec Pierce is probably not going to hit the market. It certainly seems like with the transition tag getting put on Daniel Jones, he will get the franchise tag. So it doesn't seem like he's going to hit the market. But I've heard of other names. I mean, I still think there's interest in bringing Calvin Austin back. The one guy that came up across multiple different people I talked to is Jalen Tolbert. He played for Mike McCarthy in Dallas. He had his best season under Mike McCarthy. I think it was for about 700 yards. I'm not a huge Jalen Tolbert fan. I think he's kind of just a guy, but he can give you good outside perimeter depth. But Mike McCarthy apparently loves the kid, super high character player. That could be someone you look at. That would be a cheap deal, though, like $3 million. So certainly could sign someone else in addition to him. But I think the draft is going to be a really big part of this. The other thing, and I alluded to it a little bit in a reply on X today. It's, everyone was talking about, man, they have 12 draft picks. You should spend all the 12 draft picks, or you should do this with the 12 draft picks. I don't think they're going to have 12 draft picks come the April. I don't think they're going to. And the reason I say that is because I think they're scouring the veteran trade market. And I think they're going to be pretty active in that market. They have enough cap space to bring in some guys. I think they're going to look at veteran wide receivers. I think they're going to look at defensive tackle depth. I think they maybe look at tackle with Broderick Jones' injury being kind of thrown up. But I think the Steelers are going to be pretty active in that trade market. And some of it might not just be them trading for guys. It might be trading out guys and trying to swap salaries and doing different things like that. I think they're going to be a pretty active team in the trade market. And that is one thing that kind of came out of that was, the Steelers have the ammo to be like, hey, sure, you could trade up with it, right? You could certainly trade up with those picks. You can also trade those for veterans, though. And that's, I think, something that's attractive to the Steelers in some respect. Maybe you can get a veteran wide receiver. I think, there's been a lot of names thrown out there. Jalen Waddle. I don't think Jalen Waddle's going anywhere from what I heard. Brian Thomas Jr. has been a name that's been thrown around. I think the Steelers are interested in him, but I don't really think he's going to fit their kind of profile of what they want to spend. Right now, I think the Jags want a 1 for him. If you can maybe get him for a 2, that changes the formula. But right now, I think they want a first-round pick for him. So I don't think the Steelers will trade their first-round pick. And then you kind of look down the board, and there's other guys that maybe could be moved. A Chris Godwin, a DJ Moore, someone on that vein. Could you get someone like that? That's, I think, a question. So keep an eye on the veteran market, I think, in that regard. I do think defensive tackle is a really big one to watch in the trade market. There's not a lot of good defensive tackles out in free agency this year. They could spend a pick on one, and I think they probably will because they need multiple bodies. But I also think they're looking at like sure-handed depth, and that defensive tackle room right now needs it. They had almost unplayable players play at times last year, guys like Logan Lee and Azazio Tomewo. Just were not really up to snuff, to be quite honest with you. And so that is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about these picks. And so, yes, they're in the market for guys. At multiple positions, I think that they will look to kind of move these picks to a degree, trying to get some veteran depth, filling some holes before draft day. Because while I think there's a question of, hey, do you take the 12 picks, John, and go, hey, you could just throw these all at a wall and say it could be anything. But really, even with that amount of picks, 3 or 4 of them turning into starters is a good outcome. The draft is a crapshoot. We always hear that. And so it's not easy to always find good starters. And so if you could turn a 3rd-round pick into a legitimately good football player, I think that's something to keep an eye on. So I do think the Steelers are going to be very active in the trade veteran market this offseason, looking for ways that they can use their picks to turn them into veteran players.
Comment in the chat. True nose tackle in the draft. The DL class in this draft is deep. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do think this is a pretty deep class. It's kind of funny, to look at it because I don't think that this has the top of last year's. There's a few guys in like the back half, middle of the first. You think of guys like Peter Woods and Caden McDonald and Caleb Banks and some others in there. But I do think like the pure nose tackle group is pretty good. I mean, I think of a guy like Dom Orange from Iowa State, who's probably going to go like the 3rd, maybe the 4th round. True run stuff in Haas. Doesn't have much in the pass rush department, but if you want to run stuff, we're like, he's got it. There's a few other guys. There's a kid from Minnesota who's also very much in that vein, like a very YA Black type player who is more of a nose, though, than a true 5 like YA is. So yeah, it's a pretty good defensive line draft. I think that they do draft one, maybe two. We'll see. But I think that they certainly do draft one. But I also think that there's a need there and a want for them to add a true veteran hand that they can really rely upon, that can be a versatile player. And so I think that that might come from the trade market, and that's something to keep an eye on.
And just to refresh our memory with the timing of this thing, you have this legal tampering period which begins Monday, but they can't start inking any new free agents till Wednesday around 4. But the trades are separate deals that could start happening when, and obviously you could have trades right up even into the draft. When do you think some of these trades could go down? Like, give us a look ahead time frame here.
I mean, you're seeing teams do it right now, right? David Montgomery got traded. You're seeing some guys that are clearly in the market getting moved. And I think the Steelers are going to be pretty active just going up through the entire thing. So like a firm timeline, probably in the free agency period. I think that is as pretty fair to say leading up to the draft. The Steelers have done it enough, right? They've been very active before. They've done it after the draft. Now, I think that that's more so not going to be as happenstance this year. I think they're going to look more towards now because the 26 capital maybe doesn't matter as much as the 27 capitals they're going to have because they're going to need a quarterback next year probably. And we'll get to the quarterback class this year, but I have some comments to say on that. But I think this year they're really focused on how do we kind of refurbish this team. There's a lot of holes on this football team, guys, like there are when you just look at it overall. And you can't go into 21 and say, we need this. We absolutely need that, right? You kind of want to be there where you say, we want this, we want that, but it's not a need, right? That's what the Steelers have always really operated by, and they certainly have so much cap space, and they have so many picks. You can try and fill out the roster nicely, and I think that's one way to do it. Now, part of that also might be flipping some things around. You kind of look at the roster and try and trade some pieces, maybe even for future draft picks. That could be something you look at too. So I think the Steelers are going to kind of want this dual-barreled thing where they're going to want to try and bring in vets that could also be using some 2026 trade capital. But I also think they're going to want to maybe get some 2027 picks because they need more, right? They need more 2027 picks if they want ammo to trade up. So there's going to be some kind of both sidesing, I think, on some of these where you're going to be like, why is that an element? Why is that an element? But they all kind of, you see the long-term vision, and it's like, oh, that's why that is.
No, that's great to think about. This is not just about 1 year. Obviously, they want to field a team under Mike McCarthy that's going to be competitive, but they are building something bigger, and that franchise quarterback chess piece has yet to fall into place. We are going to get to those quarterbacks and talk about, but we got to go back to Omar Khan's knowing he has to make amends with the wide receiver, in multiple ways. Like you said, flood the zone. Of all those meetings they took at the combine, what are the players that intrigue you the most, that look like the best fit in Pittsburgh? And are there any players that they didn't meet with to maybe fake people out that they still have their eye on another guy that wasn't on that list that they took meetings with?
I mean, in terms of the formal list they put out, I mean, I think there's some receivers there that I really like. Omar Cooper's a guy that I've really liked for a while. He is connected with Steelers wide receivers coach Adam Henry. Henry recruited him to Indiana. From what I was told, that formal was dynamite between the Steelers and Omar Cooper. Cooper told the team that that Adam Henry was his favorite coach he's ever played for. I thought that was interesting. So there's some things there. I think with Omar Cooper and the Steelers, that one interests me. And he's just a tough football player. Makes great grabs through traffic, has great hands, runs clean, crisp routes. He's tough as nails. Even when he's not in the progression, he fights and competes his tail off. I mean, you're talking about a guy to me that is really, really worth. I mean, I think he's a top 30 player in this class. I didn't give him a true round one grade, but if you took him at 21, I don't think anyone's batting an eye at that. Some of the other receivers I really like, DeJon Stribling out of Ole Miss. If you watched Ole Miss's run in the college football playoffs, this guy's name came up so many times. You want to talk about a pure route running artist. He brings that to the table, really like him. They met with all of the wide receivers, like all the top wide receivers, and I like Mekhi Lemon, Carnell Tate, and Jordan Tyson. I like all three of those guys. I'm a Casey Concepcion guy too. I think there's 5 really good top wide receivers in this class. They met with a few offensive linemen. Chase Basantis out of Texas A&M is an interesting guard to me. I think he's a fun player. He's a real mauler. He's the type of guy that's plug and play. Could take him in the second round. There was some corners as well, I think, that are interesting. D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana and Keontae Scott out of Miami. You guys saw these 2 nickels just light it up in the college football playoff. I think they're both very good players. The Steelers need a nickel really badly to me. I don't really want Eccles starting in the slot. I think, it was a good pivot midseason, but ideally you get another person in there. I think ideally at this point, this was kind of interesting. People talking around the org, they're saying, if we can, we'd like to keep Jalen Ramsey at safety. So that's where I'm acting like he's going to go. So Jalen Ramsey at safety feels like the right way to go about it. If you're going to do that, you need a slot corner. So those 2 guys make a lot of sense to me. So I look at some safeties they met with. They met with Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. He's a really fun player. He can do a little bit of everything. So they met with just a wide variety of guys. They met with a ton of linebackers too. Good CJ Allen out of Georgia. We haven't talked about linebacker 21 very often, but he would be the one that would probably be at 21, and is certainly an interesting piece. And they met with a number of defensive tackles as well. Caden McDonald I talked about, Peter Woods, all of those guys that we talked about they have met with. So really scouring the board, if you will, but just a few of those guys that I really like. I like Chris Johnson out of San Diego State as his corner as well. He's a really good tackling corner, feisty guy, good player. And then my favorite kind of all team hair on fire guy, safety Bud Clark. We talked about him at the Senior Bowl. He had a great Senior Bowl, and the Steelers met with him formally at the NFL Combine. If you meet at the Senior Bowl and then meet formally at the Combine, the alarm bells start going off to me. That means there's some interest here with the Steelers and him. He is he just plays at 120 miles per hour always. And I love that, and I appreciate that. If anything else, this guy's going to be an absolute demon special teamer. He's a day 3 pick, energy setter, the type of guy Danny Smith would fall in love with. And I think that is the highest compliment I can give to a guy that might be a depth safety. So someone to keep an eye on there. Caden Weegan out of Iowa. This was an interesting one because this was the only really late round wide receiver they met with. He's a slot-specific return man, and he is one of the best return men to come out in recent memory. We're talking about, true specialist return men. The Steelers haven't had one of these, generally speaking. Calvin Austin can obviously return punts, but Weegan's a punt and kick return, and he was dynamic. I mean, when you talk to him, he's like, I looked up to guys like Devin Hester and Cordero Patterson and Dante Hall. I mean, we're Josh Cribbs. Like, these were names he mentioned. These are guys you think about when you think of, the best return men of the 21st century. He's looking up to them. He thinks of himself more as a return man than a receiver. So that's going to be one to look at. 6th round pick on a return man. The Steelers' return game the past few years has just been absolutely dreadful. I think that's something that's gone under the wire for a lot of people, but he could be someone that you maybe spend one of those late round picks on that can bring a burst to a spot that maybe you didn't think about as a depth piece.
No, great stuff, Nick. Great way to just give us the rundown at those flash guys in all those different positions. The guys in the chat, though, they want to know your top 4 receivers in this draft in order, and then who is most likely to be there at 21 for the Steelers. And if it's not a wide receiver, who will they be agonizing over at pick 21? What other players at other positions could be in the mix at that pick 21?
So I'll go top 5 because I kind of put these guys in a bucket. My top, it goes Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate, Casey Concepcion, Omar Cooper. Those are my top 5 in that order. I had a question that I saw. Is Mekhi Lemon still your wide receiver 1? Because I don't know if you saw this, John, his interview with the media at the podium, his body language was a little interesting, right? He was like a snake almost. I'll tell you this, it reminded me a lot of that because I sat there for like the whole 10-minute presser and with Mekhi Lemon, and it reminded me almost of a Landon Roberts presser in that there's a Landon Roberts and then there's E-Rob. And yes, that is a thing. There are some players that have these alter egos that go on the field. 30 seconds in, someone asked this guy about his height, and he was 5'10", and people have used that against him as a detriment. And it's like something switched in Mekhi Lemon. I don't know what happened, but it's almost like the football player in him, the competitor, just popped out. And so I will say this. I'm not that worried about Mekhi Lemon. I talked with multiple teams after the reports came out. They said his character is very strong across all 4 teams I talked to. All 4 scouts that I talked to, they said his work in terms of the football IQ portion of this game was unreal in terms of just understanding leverage, coverages, where to sit, different things like that. I got a pretty going report about Mekhi Lemon. So I'm not super worried about Mekhi Lemon. I think he's a guy that can really just win as a ball winner, man. He's 5'10", but he can run routes at a very high level. This is a guy that I think is very much in the vein of an Amon-Ra St. Brown. And he's a really high-level player. Jordan Tyson is the one that if we're talking about a guy that could fall out of this top 3 group to 21, he's the one. Tate is going to be, I think, a top 10 pick. I think he's going to be a guy that pops in. He just not a lot of projection in Carnell Tate's game. He is a high-floor guy that is going to be a plug-and-play, very good player. When you look at Tyson, when he plays, we might be talking about the true best wide receiver in the class, but he doesn't play a lot. He has never completed a full season of college football. He has been hurt every single year he has played. He suffered a devastating knee injury his first year in college. I think it was meniscus, PCL, MCL, and ACL. He missed 2023 with that injury. 2024, he had a really good year, broke his clavicle. This year, again, having a really good year, tore both hamstrings. Like that is something, pulled both hamstrings. It's a tear in the muscle, but it's not as serious as I made it sound. It's not like he had surgery or anything on him. That is the medical report. Can the guy stay healthy? The Steelers, as we have talked about so many times, John, how many times did we talk about this now? When medicals pop up, the Steelers seem to be there to stop your fall. Troy Faltanu had this, remember? And the Steelers got a guy at 20 that probably shouldn't have been there at 20 because he had the knee medicals. And so they got a guy there in true talent. If Jordan Tyson's there at 21, this is a sprint your card up to the podium as fast as you possibly can type of football player. So to me, that's the one guy that could fall out of that top 3 group. Concepcion is an interesting player. Really dynamic player, good route runner. The hands are very suspect, John. He had 7 drops this year, concentration drops. I was on the fan radio today, and I kind of called him a less volatile version of Deontay Johnson, because Deontay would run backwards and do all these other things. He's not that volatile. He's not like the biggest roller coaster in the league, but he's going to drop. He's going to have a few drops, and I know that's going to really, if the Steelers draft him, some people in Pittsburgh aren't going to be happy about it as the result of that. But Concepcion's a good player, and the one thing when I was talking with the scout this week is, he said, you're going to be surprised at how close Mekhi Lemon and Casey Concepcion go on draft day. I thought that was interesting. So maybe Casey Concepcion goes a little higher than we thought, or maybe Mekhi Lemon drops a little further than we thought. That's something to keep an eye on. And then I think Omar Cooper will be there at 21. It really depends on the board and how Steelers view it with him. But I think he's a rock-solid football player in all regards, man. He does a lot of things really well. So that's my top 5. I think it's a really good class. I don't have Denzel Boston in there. I know a lot of people are wondering why that. Struggles to create consistent separation a little bit too much for me. I think he's a good high floor 2-3 type. I have some questions about taking him at 21. Big bodied, a little stiff in the ankles, which I think kind of hurts his ability to win on the top of routes. I think his work at the line of scrimmage is actually pretty decent. He's got some really good releases in his bag, and he certainly goes up and wins. He plays big. I like that. If you're going to be a big receiver, play big. There's a lot of receivers that are big but don't play big. He does play big, but he kind of is in that second round bucket to me more so than up top with the rest of these guys. Good player. Would I take him at 21? I'm a little iffy on that.
Right. And I've kind of talked myself out of the fact that they're going to trade up from 21, given what you said about, reserving some picks, for next year and having ammunition. I don't think they want to part with that to move up. So, and I know you're on record, at least on X, that you believe it will be a receiver at 21.
Yes.
But if it's not a receiver, where do they go, and who are give us a couple other names who you think will be there at 21 that could tempt the Steelers if it's not a receiver?
Well, the big one we were talking about before the combine was Venga Ioane, the Penn State guard. I do not think he makes it to 21 anymore. I think he's going earlier. In fact, he may be a Baltimore Raven. Would be a great pick for them if they got him. They need interior help like no other in that offense, and he'd be a great pick. There are some other options, but here's what I was told. If the wide receiver board isn't great, where would the Steelers go? And it seemed like from what I was talking about, the trenches were actually the thing that popped up. And that might not be surprising to some because you look at Andy Weidel and Omar Khan's first few years, and you're like, well, that's all they focused on. So if you're not going to draft a receiver, you're going to draft that. And the Steelers, I think, really want James Pierre or Asante Samuel back. It could be both of them. Wouldn't surprise me if they brought both of them back. I'm not necessarily sure they view James Pierre as a true corner two. And I think that might be the one thing. You know, there could be a guy like Avion Terrell there. I don't think he makes it to 21. Jermon McCoy and Mansour Delaney, I do not think make it to 21. Now, McCoy is the real kind of, I guess, wild card there. He has medical stuff because he didn't test. He had a torn ACL last year, didn't play all last year. Could he fall? In terms of true talent, he's a top 10 talent. If he falls to 21, could we be in another similar medicals position, right? You know, BPA, the medicals are there, but Steelers might be the team to take the shot on him, and he would be ready for, you know, rookie minicamp, all that. So you wouldn't miss any time with Jermon McCoy, but it feels like he's a guy that's going to go higher because of the high level of talent he is, which would leave you a corner with Colton Hood. You got Brandon Cisse, I think, in there. You have a few others that I think are a little overrated for 21 overall, personally speaking. They're kind of in that middle part. Maybe if you trade back, you would do that. But I'm not really seeing the Steelers in a trade back scenario, to be quite honest with you. It doesn't seem like that's something that they really want to do. They would trade up more so than trade down. So corner's in this weird spot to me where it's just stuck in between. Safety, you could talk me into Dylan Thieneman or Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Again, doesn't feel like the true value's there. D tackle's the one spot where I can look at it and say, okay, could you get a guy like Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, Caden McDonald? One of those guys looks like they could be their guard. I think of a guy like Caden Proctor who played tackle in Alabama, but maybe could be a guard at the next level. He's a big guy. You know, definitely some shades of Mekhi Becton there, not Mekhi Lemon, Mekhi Becton and some of his profile. I think the Steelers are a little concerned about him keeping the weight off, though. He's 355, and he's fluctuated up further at times. So I think that is something that they would be a little concerned by. But I mean, at that point, you know, you're looking at guys, you know, is a guy like Spencer Fano there? Is a guy like Caleb Lomu there? There could be some guys that might be there that you might be interested in. So that offensive line group could be something. And Fano is someone that's really not been talked about a lot. He played tackle, but worked at guard and center in the drills at the combine. He's just a really solid technician overall. Could be someone at least to just kind of keep an eye on. So if the receiver position doesn't really work out, the trenches are going to have guys at D tackle and probably a guard or tackle, flexible, that the Steelers are going to want and be interested in. And maybe that corner position isn't going to be as strong because you look at, you know, I don't know how sold they are on Colton Hood. I think, you know, maybe that's a little early for Brandon Cisse. And so these types of guys, I think, might be a little too far out to be taken at 21. And so they might go trenches. And I think that's kind of the rationale is you look at it, if the wide receiver room isn't great, unless a guy like Avion Terrell falls, unless a guy like Jermod McCoy falls, unless a guy kind of, you know, Venga Ioane does fall, unless a guy like that does fall, it feels like the Steelers are in this kind of rock boat, and it feels like, you know, D tackle or guard would be the BPA, not corner. And so that's why I would imagine they said trenches. And, you know, then there's the Ty Simpson question. I mean, at what point does he become a value at 21? I think, you know, and I said this before, he is an interesting player for the Steelers. I'll say this. I heard a lot more praise for Ty Simpson out of the Steelers organization than I anticipated when I went to Indianapolis.
Mm.
That caught me a little bit off guard, John. And I don't really know where that's going. I don't think they're going to take him at 21. They laid it real heavily thick on from what my conversations with them that wide receiver is the probably likely position or the trenches, as I mentioned. But man, the formal interview they had with him, I mean, they just raved about this kid on the board in terms of his situational kind of management, in terms of his ability to read defenses, dissect defenses, draw a play up, and understand where they're going. I mean, we were talking about complex things, 2-minute drill things. I mean, McCarthy put the 4 quarterbacks that met with them. It was Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, Garrett Nussmeier, and Drew Aller here formally, and they put them all through the same rigor, which was just situational, 2-minute. Different things like that. Draw it on the board. Show me where you would want to place this ball here, et cetera, et cetera. Just the intricacies of the game. Ty Simpson apparently absolutely killed it. So that's something I thought that was really interesting. And one thing that they really like about him is his willingness to just rip the ball over the middle of the field with anticipation. That was something that people really liked about Ty Simpson. And I do think that is one of his strengths, but I don't think he's really a pick at 21. Generally speaking, I think they like him. I don't think they love him, and I think you got to love a quarterback to take him there. So to me, what you're looking at is one of those wide receivers, or as we kind of broke down the board, you're going to look at one of those guards, tackle types, or maybe a D tackle if the wide receiver board isn't what they like.
Right. And yeah, I mean, and we know, and that was kind of interesting just listening to what the Steelers were saying about the quarterbacks and what Mike McCarthy is putting them through their paces on the whiteboard. And we know that the Steelers broke their mold of the typical coach they usually hire. They hired, a veteran, older guy specifically to find and develop the next franchise quarterback. So that work has to begin at some point. Now, I agree with you. You got to love a guy to take him at 21 as a quarterback, because talk about the drafting a crapshoot. There's no bigger crapshoot than drafting a quarterback. I mean, that's the biggest crapshoot of them all.
The one thing that Omar Khan said he needs an AFC, and this is a good comment in the comment section. Yeah. He's not an AFC North quarterback, and to a degree, that is cliche, and that is kind of talking out of your mouth and saying something that just sounds good for the presses. But on the other hand, what is an AFC North quarterback? A guy that is durable, a guy that can really handle it. But it hasn't been in recent years. I mean, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are hurt fairly often, aren't they? But Ty Simpson is a guy that really battled through injuries all year, man. I mean, he had a back issue. He had a cracked rib. He had gastritis. He had a bunch of things going on. He lost like 20 pounds during the year. So a lot of injuries for Ty Simpson. Can he hold up? I mean, there's 15 games of Ty Simpson tape, 1 year starting. It's just hard to say, is he durable enough? Or if he couldn't get through an SEC schedule, can he get through an NFL schedule of 17 games? And I think, that is, I think, a huge question in terms of the Ty Simpson stuff. Is how durable is he? He's not that big. He's a decently small guy. He's like 6'1". He's just not built like a normal AFC North quarterback. He's not Big Ben. He's not Joe Flacco. He's not this big burly guy. But to be fair, neither are Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. So there's that in mind. But I think the injury question is certainly something to bring up with Ty Simpson, because that is a big thing. And I think it definitely affected his performance down the stretch.
The other guy we got to mention, just simply because, there's a lot of PA interest, is Drew Aller. He has a lot of game tape out, but the big games, that tape, he's trying to overcome the tape, some of the tape he's put out there. He looked damn good in shorts and a T-shirt throwing the football at the combine. A lot of people say he is climbing up the draft board as a result of that combine performance. What's your take on Drew Aller, and your take? Do the Steelers take any quarterback even later in this draft, or is it something they'll take a look? They'll get Rodgers back. They'll take a look at Will Howard, and then really look next year. What's your feeling there on Aller? Yeah. The Steelers spend one of those precious picks on a QB.
So think about Aller, and he is Really, the thing about Drew Aller is he is all tools. Like the arm is phenomenal, and he has an absolute bazooka. Like there's no question about this. When this guy wants to push the ball down the field, he might have the strongest arm in this class. That tool is just grade A elite. And I think that gives him a physical tools edge that maybe others don't have in this class. I also heard his meeting went really well. I think he did a very good job on the board work and stuff like that. Mike McCarthy really weighs that stuff heavily. It seems like he did a very nice job. Now, I also think the Steelers have some concerns about Drew Allar's performances in some of the really big games and some of the very high level defenses he played. So I do think that was a bit of a concern for them. But I do think, Aller's a guy on their radar now. I think it's like the fourth round with him. I do think they'll look into drafting one later. I think that they want to take dart throws at this position consistently. I think that until they land a guy, they want to take that into consideration. I also don't necessarily think that Mason Rudolph is 100% the day one backup quarterback. I think that's going to be something. I think, Will Howard, he's got a shot here to win that job if he can showcase what he can do. Or that rookie, if that rookie is good enough, maybe he can win that job. Mason Rudolph, I think, will be tested this year. So there's going to be movement depth chart wise, at least available to them if they can do that. So I think that they will at least take one potentially later in the draft. They need a fourth quarterback. They're going to bring in a fourth quarterback, whether that is a free agent on the minimum, something like that, a late draft pick, or maybe even a UDFA. Someone like Talon Green. I mean, he ran a 4.37, I think. The tools are there. I don't really think he's going to be, he's very, very raw. But there's a lot of upside because of those tools. So if we're just talking about pure tools picks, like Aller and Talon Green feel like the two guys to me. So we'll see where the Steelers go. They did meet with Nussmeier. This team really likes Nussmeier's arm as well. I know that's something. I think I'm pretty out on Garrett Nussmeier, to be quite honest with you. And I think he is a guy that the tape showcases someone that is not on the upswing at all. But yeah, we'll see where they go quarterback, man. I think that they end up drafting one later. It's probably going to be more of a tools-based guy than a guy that is very high floor.
All right, there you go, guys. A great chat today, and we'll be back again next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And at that point, we're going to start having more than speculation and analysis. We're going to start having answers. Who is the guys in free agency? We're going to start hearing the rumblings and hearing about the deals that'll be inked the following day on Wednesday. And who knows, maybe we'll start hearing about some trades that Nick is projecting for these Steelers. So the answers to what this 2026 team is going to look like are going to start coming in next week. Be here at 4 o'clock Tuesday, and we'll talk all about it. Until then, go Steelers.